Luminis, by J.W. Steele. It was a dark, cold day in April, when Dr. Cecil Pettigrave, chief marine biologist of the Veltrax 7, Plankton Corporation, slipped through the iron doors of the Meadowlark Detention Center. His movements were quick, yet deliberate, his mind fixed on the uprising brewing inside the facility. The air reeked of worn clammy sneakers, and stale algae, a lingering scent that seemed to seep into the very walls. Veltrax 7, a storm-ravaged oceanic dwarf planet, orbiting a massive gas giant called Aquilise, was known for its rolling luminescent seas. These glowing waters were the habitat of Luminis, a nutrient-rich, green, phytoplankton, named for its ethereal glow, which shimmered like starlight across the waves of the planet's harsh and unforgiving environment. This austere sea was the only known place in the solar system where Luminis could be found, making it an invaluable resource, sought after throughout the galaxy. The algae was more than just a food source, it was a vital necessity, the foundation of survival, for entire continents that depended on its miraculous properties. The extraction process, overseen by the Veltrax conglomerate, was tightly regulated, under strict laws governing its collection, processing, and distribution. These regulations were enforced with unwavering precision, and many of the lifers, now incarcerated in Meadowlark, found themselves imprisoned there for the remainder of their years, through violating them. The penal colony, however, was in turmoil. For months now, the phytoplankton rations allotted to Meadowlark had been fried. A cheaper, preserved alternative that failed to deliver the same mind-altering effects as the fresh, organic variety. Prisoners bitterly referred to this inferior grade as sea slime. Mocking its inability to provide the euphoric energy boost, they called the mellow jello, derived from the living aquatic organism. The administration, citing budget cuts, prioritized profit margins over prisoner morale. But the prisoners noticed the difference in quality and its effects immediately. Dr. Pettigrave had been summoned to the facility in his capacity as a mediator to manage the escalating tension. No one understood the biochemistry of Luminix better than him, and the prisoners trusted Cecil like he was the mighty Quinn. The tall, lean Dr. Pettigrave was an eccentric genius, and through his years of research, had developed a secret formula that increased the potency of the mellow jello, incubating in the bioreactors by a factor of 7. He knew all too well the precarious balance the penal colony depended on. The moon's survival hinged not just on the phytoplankton, but on the fragile ecosystem of trust, control, and compliance it upheld. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about plankton, it was about supporting the inmates of Meadowlark, who relied on the vibrant energy Luminis provided. Natural organic Luminis was like a freshly bloomed flower, basking in sunlight, teeming with vitality. It packed a powerful punch, lifting even the most hardened prisoner's spirit, as they endured their grueling 16-hour workdays. In contrast, the freeze-dried clone was little more than a lifeless, whinnied husk, its core stripped of testosterone and vital adrenal-stimulating compounds that the inmates craved. Without the real thing, they became sluggish, accident-prone, and dangerously vulnerable to Meadowlark's brutal conditions. Veltrax 7 wasn't the only sector affected. The sudden decline in algae quality triggered riots at trade stations, and caused a sharp drop in productivity across the industrialized planets. But the impact on Meadowlark's inmates was even more severe. Without the plankton's full potency, their grueling work schedules became unbearable, driving them to the brink of rebellion. Organic Luminis was all they craved, an obsession that consumed them. Many were willing to risk their lives, just to get a single swallow of the miraculous stimulant. Meadowlark was a relentless, unyielding machine. With its oppressive cold, toxic air, and grueling labor, that wore away the courage of even the most hardened criminals. Only the fresh green jello primed their bodies to endure another day, in the unforgiving depths of Meadowlark's endless conflict. Dr. Pettigrave peered into one of the massive holding tanks, his gaze fixed on the murky green fluid. It shimmered faintly, but the once vibrant glow, an unmistakable sign of Luminis at peak potency, was gone. Something was off, and he knew it wasn't just a coincidence. "It's starving," Cecil muttered under his breath, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "Starving?" His assistant, Nora asked, leaning over to catch a glimpse of the plankton clusters floating sluggishly below the surface. "They're not getting the necessary stimulus. Something's disrupted the inoculation process. Without my formula, the algae can't reach full reproductive maturity." His tones was clipped, his mind racing through the possibilities of what may have occurred. But there was only one, and her name was Nora. She shrugged her shoulders. What if it's not just a software issue? What if someone's sabotaging this operation? Pettigrave squared his shoulders, determination hardening his features. "We don't have time to wait for bureaucratic nonsense to fix this. I'll take Arcturus and head to the bioreactors. We need to find out what's happening at the source." "And you're going with me?" "Do I have a choice?" Nora asked. She giggled. "It's only 1,500 kilometers away, and I wouldn't miss it for the world." It was a plan that had taken Nora years to develop. Each step meticulously calculated. She'd sealed the deal with Comrade Romanoff, the ruthless prison warden of Meadowlark, and chairman of the board of directors. He promised 895 million Star Vault credits, an unimaginable fortune, for the complete chemical equation of Pettigrave's formula. The composition was more than just a breakthrough, it was a revolution. With it, Valtrax 7 would monopolize the market, controlling the Luminis supply for entire solar system. Romanoff, with his iron grip on the prison and his insatiable greed, was the perfect buyer. Desperate, corrupt, and surrounded by the wealth of the stockholders, willing to do whatever it took to secure his power over the solar system. All she needed was one last thing. The 7 exponents of the chemical equation, worth trillions. Nora could already picture her dream becoming reality: luxurious private villas, limitless wealth, and Dravik, her towering cyclopean lover, by her side. He was a star-class bodybuilder, a champion who had claimed the coveted Mr. Galactic Titan title. He proudly wore his medallion everywhere they went like a badge of honor. She had played the long game, meticulously planning every step, and now the final scene was in motion. Nothing could stop them. They boarded Arcturus and set out for the bioreactors. The journey to the industrial complex was brief. Tension hung heavy between them, thick with unspoken suspicion. Neither of them talked, but they both knew the truth. The inoculation complex was an industrial maze, lined with endless holding tanks, the size of boxcars, each one filled with pure luminous plankton, slowly germinating in Cecil's carefully formulated nutrient mix. As they stepped inside, a towering figure emerged from the shadows. Dravik. With terrifying speed, the one-eyed brute lunged forward, delivering a devastating blow that sent Cecil crashing to the cold metal floor. The impact drove the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping, as pain radiated through his body. Nora stepped forward, and pressed the heel of her boot against his chest. "We're done playing games, Pettigrave," she said, towering over him, like an arrogant god. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "I'll ask you once, give us the remainder of the formula. If you refuse, I'll let Dravik dance with you until you run out of breath. Now, hand over the missing symbols of the equation." The doctor recoiled, and shoved Nora's boot away. He struggled to his feet, his movements slow and clumsy. His nose was twisted, and his eyes red and swollen. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and smirked. "That was a nice move, Dravik. What else can you do?" The one-eyed cretin stared at him, then looked at Nora. "You want I should send him back to Stargate, babe?" She rolled her eyes. "No, you idiot. We need him alive," she snapped. Dravik's eye widened, he lowered his head, and fumbled with his medallion. The doctor's mind raced, as he carefully chose his words. I'm a doctor, we serve life, not death, his voice steady. The formula isn't worth dying for. I'll give it to you, no tricks, but I want 20% of what you'll make from this deal. That way, you and Bright Eye here can disappear. And I get to walk away. You can live like kings for the rest of your lives, and I get to keep mine. Dravik stepped closer, his hot, foul breath creeping over Cecil's neck like a toxic fog. Nora removed her nanocore from the pocket of her lab coat and handed it to him. Write it down, pigeon, every integer. Pettigrave scribbled down the symbols and handed it back to her. His eyes narrowed. There you go, doll, he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. I hope you enjoy your holiday in paradise. Just remember Romanov adores you, you son of a... Unbeknownst to them, Pettigrave had already secured his future. He had secretly sent the complete formula to Comrade Romanov, securing a lucrative deal that guaranteed his protection and ensured the prisoners would once again receive the pure, organic Luminis. Now, all that remained was to wait for the inevitable. The door slammed and they were gone. Cecil sprinted to the observation deck, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached the massive skyport just in time to see Nora and Dravik climb into the shuttle. Nora, the ever-confident pilot, powered up the engines. Dravik turned toward the canopy. He flashed an obscene gesture to Dr. Pettigrave. And Nora burst into laughter. Like a rocket, Arcturus sailed into the sky. Meanwhile, in his dimly lit office, Comrade Romanov watched the shuttle's ascent on the telescreen, a smirk on his pockmarked face. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping the detonator in his hand. She was something, he muttered in his thick, broken accent. Oh boy, something nice. With a slow, deliberate press, he triggered the button. Arcturus erupted in a brilliant explosion. The once pristine sky was now streaked with fiery fragments, cascading down like a meteor shower. Cecil stood motionless at the window, the glow of the wreckage reflecting in his weary eyes. He exhaled slowly, and rubbed his swollen cheek. I guess paradise wasn't in the stars after all, he murmured. He watched the last embers flicker and fade into the ocean. He shook his head, and quipped, such a pity, even dreams burn up on re-entry.